Chapter 17. 13 Minutes. Through the shimmering tear in the air, Finn could see the inside of a small, cramped holding cell. The walls were smooth, seamless white. Against the wall of the room sat a narrow, small bed, and curled tightly into a ball on the thin mattress, in a drab, gray institutional tunic, was a young boy. 13 minutes, Ellie whispered, her eyes flying open. She looked exhausted, a thin trickle of dark red blood slowly making its way down from her left nostril, but she held her ground, staring fiercely at the portal. Go. Tess didn't hesitate. She ducked low, stepping swiftly through the folded air, instantly leaving the cold, red gloom of the iron orchid. As promised, she emerged directly beneath the doorframe of the cell. She immediately reached up, snapping the small black AI splicing unit magnetically against the wall directly behind the camera housing. A tiny green light flashed on the box. Loop is active, Tess whispered over the comms, giving Finn a sharp nod. We're ghosts. Finn didn't hesitate. He ducked low, stepping carefully through the folded air, instantly leaving the cold, red gloom of the iron orchid and stepping onto the pristine, sterile floor of the Athelgard facility. Raffi went next. The massive weapons specialist had to duck drastically and turn his broad, armored shoulders sideways to squeeze his bulk through the small opening. He slipped through with surprising grace, his suppressed mag rifle raised and ready, the wheels of the industrial trolley making a soft, muffled squeak as he hauled it across the threshold. Finn immediately scanned the cell. The door leading out into the main hall was to his right as he exited the gate and was securely locked from the outside. He walked quietly over to the narrow bed. James, Finn whispered, keeping his voice as low and soothing as possible. He gently placed a hand on the sleeping boy's shoulder. The boy jerked awake instantly, a panicked, silent scream dying in his throat as his wide, terrified eyes locked onto the tall, dark-haired stranger pointing a heavy blaster at the floor. It's okay, Finn said quickly, holding up his free hand in a peaceful gesture. We aren't Athelgard. Ellie sent us. We're here to take you home. James blinked, staring past Finn's shoulder. Floating in the center of his locked cell was a swirling, ragged tear in reality. On the far side, Ellie stood, wiping blood from her nose and offering a small, courageous smile. James scrambled off the narrow cot, completely ignoring the massive, heavily armed strangers standing in his cell. He darted past Finn, scrambling through the jagged 5-foot tear in the air and tumbling into the red-lit cargo bay of the Iron Orchid. Ellie smiled, throwing her arms around the boy. You came back, James breathed, burying his face in Ellie's oversized jacket. He pulled back slightly, his eyes wide and terrified as he looked around the dark, cavernous hangar of the blockade runner. Did you see them? Have you seen them yet? No, Ellie whispered quickly, wiping the line of blood with the back of her sleeve. Because it is only a small gate, it hasn't caught their attention yet. But they will notice soon. We still have to be quick. She looked up at Finn, who was standing on the other side of the gate in the sterile white cell. You need to open this door, then Jade's door, and we still have to reach the machine. Otherwise, we can't jump out of the system. On it, Finn said, giving her a sharp nod. He looked to the side of the gate at the door of James's cell. There was no visible handle or access panel on the inside. Finn looked at Tess. Can you get this open quietly? Give me 30 seconds, Tess muttered, already pulling a specialized diagnostic scanner and a magnetic decryption spike from her belt. She knelt by the edge of the door, running the scanner along the frame until it beeped softly. Finding the hidden electronic locking mechanism, she jammed the decryption spike directly into the narrow seam. Sparks showered silently into the room as the spike bypassed the physical lock, overriding the magnetic seal. With a soft, hydraulic hiss, the heavy cell door slid open. Raffi moved first, slipping through the doorway with uncanny, predatory silence, mag rifle raised tight to his shoulder as he swept the corridor. "I have eyes on the sentry," Raffi rumbled softly over the squad's encrypted comms. "He's at the far end of the corridor, guarding the doors to the testing chamber. He's looking at a datapad. The rest of the hallway is clear." "Raffi," Finn murmured over the comms, stepping up to the edge of the cell doorway but remaining hidden. "You're up. Non-lethal." Raffi offered a grim, eager smile from beneath his visor. He slung his mag rifle over his back and stepped silently out of the cell, disappearing down the hallway. Finn and Tess waited in agonizing silence inside James's cell. The absolute quiet of the facility was broken only by the faint hum of the power grid. Finn gripped his blaster, his eyes locked on the open doorway, counting the seconds. Raffi moved down the bright, sterile corridor with the silent grace of a seasoned hunter. He didn't rush. He simply closed the distance until he was standing directly behind the oblivious guard. With a swift, practiced motion, Raffi clamped one hand firmly over the guard's mouth, simultaneously driving his knee into the back of the man's leg. As the guard crumpled, Raffi brought his other hand down in a brutal, precise strike to the nerve cluster at the base of the guard's neck. The guard went entirely limp. Raffi, with one hand, grabbed him and carefully pulled his inert body across the polished floor to the wall away from the doors. "Target secured," Raffi said over the comms. "Hallway is clear." Finn let out a sharp breath. "Tess, get the girl's door open! We're on the clock!" Finn and Tess stepped out into the pristine corridor, crossing quickly to the identical cell door directly opposite them. Tess knelt, repeating her quick, brutal decryption process on the magnetic seal. 10 seconds later, the door hissed open. Finn slipped inside. The cell mirrored James's, down to the narrow bed. In the corner, a pale blonde girl huddled, clutching her knees, her eyes wide and brimming with tears. "Jade," Finn whispered, lowering his blaster and holding out a hand. "I'm a friend of Ellie's. We're getting you out of here." The girl didn't hesitate. She scrambled up from the corner, her bare feet slapping against the cold floor, and bolted out of the cell. She saw the swirling black tear hovering in James's open doorway across the hall and darted straight toward it, vanishing through the veil into the safety of the orchid. "Kids are secure," Tess confirmed softly, stepping back out into the hallway and drawing a compact sidearm. She checked her chrono. "Finn, we are at 9 minutes." "Understood," Finn replied, his jaw tightening. He looked down the long corridor toward where Raffi was waiting by the heavy blast doors. "Let's go get the machine." Finn turned back to the cell, where Ellie stood beside the swirling black gate. The young girl looked pale, her dark eyes darting nervously at the place that had been her prison for so long. "Ellie," Finn said softly, stepping closer. "I need you to come with me. Just for a minute. We need you to point out the machine and make sure we don't leave anything important behind." Ellie swallowed hard, but she nodded bravely. She stepped away from the room, slipping her small hand into Finn's. They walked quickly down the corridor. When they reached the end of the hall, Tess was already kneeling by the large doors, a cluster of wires pulled from the access panel and plugged directly into her datapad. Raffi was standing guard beside her. As they neared, Ellie's gaze locked on the unconscious guard slumped by the wall. She shrank back, edging behind Finn's leg. Raffi noticed her gaze. He lowered his rifle slightly, offering her a remarkably gentle look from beneath his tactical visor. "Don't worry about him, kid. He's taking a nap. He won't be moving for a while." Before Ellie could respond, the doors hissed open. "I'm in," Tess muttered, stepping back. Inside was a large circular room bathed in harsh, blindingly bright surgical lighting. The walls were lined with complex medical monitors, humming data servers, and thick bundles of cabling. But it was the center of the room that made Ellie freeze in her tracks. She stared at the space, her small body trembling violently. She looked utterly terrified to be back in the room where the nightmares began. "Ellie," Finn asked gently, kneeling down beside her to break her trance. He pointed toward the center of the room. "Is that it? The box in the middle and the wires?" "Yes," Ellie whispered, her voice wavering. She pointed a shaking finger at a heavy, matte black metallic box sitting on a raised dais. "That's the amplifier. But... and the chair." Raffi, who was already pulling the industrial trolley into the room, paused. He looked over his shoulder. "Are you sure we need the chair, kid? It's not on the shopping list?" "I think so," Ellie said, her voice dropping apologetically. "The chair helps as well. I'm sorry. I forgot to tell you about it." Finn followed her gaze. Sitting directly in front of the black cube, connected by a thick bundle of cables, was a heavy, ornate chair. It looked entirely out of place in the sterile, high-tech room. It appeared to be constructed of polished brass and dark leather, with a high, rigid back that curved ominously over the top of the headrest, resembling a sinister, metallic hood. It was designed to isolate the subject completely, focusing their neural energy into the machine behind it. "All right," Finn said, standing up quickly. "We take the chair. Tess, how long do we have?" 6 minutes before the gate collapses," Tess said from the far wall, already plugging her portable fusion shunt into the facility's main power grid. "I'm syncing the power draw now. Raffi, you are cleared to disconnect the amplifier in 30 seconds. Raffi grunted, walking up to the dais. He grabbed the heavy brass chair by the armrests and heaved. The chair refused to move. "It's bolted down," Raffi growled, stepping back and assessing the bolts securing the chair to the floor. "And I don't have time to unscrew them." "Can you break it?" Finn asked, keeping his blaster raised toward the doors. Raffi cracked his neck. "Stand back." He planted one boot against the dais for leverage, wrapped his massive hands around the curved brass hood of the chair, and hauled backwards with a roar of exertion. The sound of shearing metal echoed loudly in the chamber. The bolts shrieked in protest, and then, with a violent, tearing crunch, the chair ripped completely free from the floor. "Tess," Raffi said, breathing heavily. "Are we clear?" "Spoof is active," Tess confirmed, her fingers flying across her datapad. "The grid thinks the machine is still connected. Pull the plug." Raffi grabbed the thick cables connecting the black box to the wall and yanked them free. He easily lifted the amplifier, set it on the trolley, and put the brass chair next to it. "Package secured," Raffi announced, grabbing the handle of the trolley. 4 minutes, Tess said with some urgency, snatching up her gear and running for the door. "We need to go now." Finn grabbed Ellie's hand, pulling her back out into the sterile white corridor. Raffi followed, the industrial trolley rattling heavily under the weight of the brass chair and the amplifier. As they crossed the threshold, Finn turned back to Tess. Can you lock it? Tess paused, her hand hovering over her datapad. Lock what? All of it, Finn ordered, his dark eyes scanning the empty hallway. Close the blast doors to the testing chamber. Lock the cells behind us. If they do a routine sweep and see open doors, the alarms go off. If we lock them, it might buy us some time before they realize the kids and the machine are actually gone. We might need every second. Tess grinned sharply. Smart. Keep moving. I'll secure the perimeter behind you. Finn went to the unconscious guard and grabbed him by his ankles, dragging him into the chamber. Then he walked down the corridor, keeping Ellie close to his side, matching Raffi's pace. Behind them, they heard the hiss and definitive clank as Tess overrode the security protocols, sealing the testing chamber tight. They reached the open door of James's cell. The swirling tear in the air still hung by the doorway of the room, though its edges were beginning to waver and fray. Through the gate, the red emergency lighting of the Orchid's cargo bay was clearly visible. The 13 minutes were almost up. 2 minutes, Tess called out, sprinting up the hallway behind them. She paused at Jade's empty cell, quickly jamming her spike into the panel to seal the door shut. Raffi didn't pause. He shoved the heavy trolley through the gate into the cargo hold, then squeezed his armored bulk sideways through the opening, rejoining the red-lit safety of the Iron Orchid. Finn nudged Ellie gently toward the gate. Go on, kid. You're safe now. Ellie took a step forward, but suddenly, she froze. Her breath hitched in her throat. Her dark eyes widened in absolute paralyzing terror, fixing on the empty corner of the small white cell. And then Ellie screamed. It wasn't a normal cry of fear. It was a raw, visceral shriek of pure horror that made the hairs on Finn's arms stand up. Through the gate in the cargo bay of the Orchid, Jade and James began to scream too. They backed away from the opening, their hands clamped over their ears, their faces pale and contorted with panic. Ellie! Finn yelled, grabbing her shoulders. Ellie, what is it? What's wrong? They're here! Ellie sobbed hysterically, trying to pull away from the empty corner of the room. The shadows! They found the door! Finn spun around, raising his blaster, his eyes sweeping the small, sterile cell. There was nothing there. The white walls were completely bare. The harsh fluorescent lights weren't even flickering. He couldn't see a single threat, but the sheer, overwhelming terror radiating from the 3 children was undeniable. They were looking at something impossible, something terrifying. Something was standing right next to him. The air in the room suddenly felt freezing cold. A suffocating pressure pressed against Finn's chest, like the crushing weight of the deep void. Tess, get in the gate! Finn roared, putting away his blaster. He didn't try to fight something he couldn't see. He grabbed Ellie around the waist, hauling her off her feet, and ran headfirst through the ragged, swirling tear in reality. They crashed onto the deck plating of the Iron Orchid, tumbling past Raffi and the trolley. The red emergency lighting of the cargo bay felt incredibly warm compared to the unnatural, icy dread that had flooded the cell. Tess! Raffi shouted, grabbing his mag rifle and aiming it at the open gate. Tess sprinted through the door of the cell, her eyes wide with panic as she felt the invisible, crushing weight of the shadows pressing in on her. She ran through the gate as the edges of the tear began to violently warp and shift, losing stability. She made it just as the gate folded in on itself. With a vibration that ran through the deck of the cargo hold, the gate was gone. The suffocating dread that had filled the air evaporated instantly. The 3 children immediately stopped screaming. Jade collapsed onto the deck, crying softly into her hands, while James sat frozen, staring at the empty space where the gate had been. Ellie lay on the floor next to Finn, gasping for breath, trembling. Finn looked around the cargo bay. The invisible darkness that had been tormenting the children was gone. They were alone again. "Is everyone okay?" Finn rasped, looking from Tess to Raffi, who still had his rifle raised. Tess gave a weak thumbs up. Raffi slowly lowered his weapon. Finn tapped his wrist comm. "Amara, we have the package, and we have the kids." "Copy that." Amara's voice crackled through the comms, tight with relief. "Get them secure. We are leaving."